Lily sat alone in her high-rise apartment, the soft hum of New York City filtering through the large windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. Outside, the skyline was alive with lights, but all she could see was the empty void inside her. The life she had carefully built, the love she had so fiercely believed in, was unraveling before her eyes. It had all started so perfectly. 3 years ago, when James Winchester had proposed to her under the golden hues of an autumn sunset, everything had seemed right. Their love was flawless, like a painting that captured a moment of complete perfection. She had loved him with every ounce of her being, and she had trusted him completely. But now, as she stared at the invitation in her hands, the weight of betrayal hung heavily in the air. The envelope was pristine, its gold embossed lettering stark against the cream paper. It was a wedding invitation, one she never expected to receive. James Winchester and Catherine Monroe cordially invite you to celebrate their union. The words burned into her mind, each letter a dagger to her chest. Catherine, her best friend, the one she had confided in through all the years of her relationship with James, the one she thought was always there for her, the one who had been hiding a secret behind her warm smiles. Lily's fingers trembled as she held the invitation, the reality of it crashing into her like a tidal wave. James, the man she had given her heart to, the man she had planned a future with, was marrying her best friend. Her gaze moved slowly to the painting that hung on the wall across from her desk. It was a work in progress, a gift she had been working on for James, a celebration of their love, of the moment he had proposed to her in Central Park, surrounded by falling leaves. But now it felt like a cruel mockery, a reminder of everything she had believed in, everything she had lost. Lily stood, her body moving instinctively toward the windows that overlooked the city. The world outside seemed so far away, and yet it was closing in on her. Every inch of her life had been built on a lie. Every gesture of affection from James, every promise, every late-night phone call had been a carefully constructed illusion. She had been the fool, the one left in the dark, while her best friend and her fiancé had been plotting behind her back. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that James had betrayed her, or the fact that Catherine, the person she had trusted most, had done the same. She felt the tightness in her chest grow, the anger bubbling up from deep within. She had spent so long planning a future with James, a future she thought would be filled with love, art, and success. Now it was all slipping through her fingers like sand. The life she had known was gone, and she was left with nothing but the shards of a broken dream. Her phone buzzed, the familiar notification sound pulling her back to reality. It was a message from her assistant, Emma. Lily, the gallery is asking for your decision on the layout for the upcoming exhibition. They need it by the end of the day. Lily glanced at the message but felt no urgency. The exhibition, her art, all of it seemed so insignificant in the face of this betrayal. With a sharp exhale, she dismissed the thought and grabbed the invitation. Again, her fingers curling tightly around the paper. Without a second thought, she crumpled it in a fist and tossed it into the trash. It felt good to let go of something that represented the life she thought she was going to have. But then, something strange happened. The moment the invitation hit the trash can, she felt a shift within herself, a flicker of resolve. She wasn't going to let this destroy her. She wouldn't let James and Catherine win. The life she had worked so hard to build wasn't over, not by a long shot. She was more than this betrayal. She was Lily Betts Davies, a rising star in the art world, and no man, no friend was going to take that away from her. She paced the room, her mind racing. She needed to get away. She needed to escape, to clear her head, to put distance between herself and everything that had happened. Her gaze landed on the calendar on her desk. 2 weeks. 2 weeks before the wedding. 2 weeks before she would be forced to face James and Catherine, the perfect couple who had stolen her future. A wild thought crossed her mind. She needed to go somewhere far away, somewhere no one knew her, where she wouldn't have to face the whispers of pity and the judgmental glances. Somewhere she could disappear, if only for a while. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and booked the first available flight. Las Vegas, the city of new beginnings, false promises, and wild decisions. It was perfect. She didn't know what she was looking for, or why Las Vegas felt like the answer. But something inside her told her that a clean break was exactly what she needed. And in that moment, she knew it was the only choice. As she packed her suitcase, throwing clothes into her Louis Vuitton bag without much thought, she felt the weight of the past week lift from her shoulders. The suffocating weight of betrayal, The anger, the confusion, all of it seemed less important now. She wasn't running away from her pain. She was running towards something unknown, something that could give her the freedom she so desperately needed. She thought about her art, the galleries, the accolades, the success. It had all felt so important before, but now it seemed trivial. She had been living for others' expectations, building a life around the approval of people who couldn't see her for who she truly was. She was more than a woman with a successful career. She was more than the art she created. She was someone who had been hurt, but she was strong enough to heal herself. And she would. Lily's phone buzzed again. It was another message from Emma. "Are you okay? We're all really worried about you. Please let me know if you need anything." Lily didn't respond. She couldn't explain herself to anyone, not yet. She needed to be alone to figure out who she was now. Her phone pinged once more. This time it was a message from James. The subject read, "We need to talk." The words made her stomach churn, but she didn't open it. Instead, she took a deep breath and closed the phone, setting it aside. She had already made up her mind. There was nothing he could say that would change what had happened. The flight to Las Vegas was booked. Lily Betts Davies was leaving New York behind, even if only for a while. She needed to get away, to breathe, to make sense of the world she now found herself in. As she stood in front of the mirror one last time, looking at the woman who had been betrayed, she realized something. The betrayal wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. There was more to her life than James, than Catherine, than the life they had planned. And whatever happened next, she would take control of it. Her life was hers to create now. And in Las Vegas, she would begin again. Lily Betts Davies sat in the cramped seat of the taxi as it sped through the streets of Manhattan, the city she had once called home, now feeling like a distant memory. The skyline blurred behind her. The towering skyscrapers like cold, indifferent sentinels watching her leave. The weight of everything she had left behind, her career, her life, pressed heavily on her chest. But it wasn't until the taxi turned onto the highway, leaving the last familiar street corner behind, that Lily truly exhaled, releasing the breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. She had come to New York as an ambitious, bright-eyed artist, eager to leave her mark on the world. And for a while it had worked. Her exhibitions had sold out. Her name had been whispered in art circles, and for all her efforts, she had found love, or so she thought. James, with his sharp suits and suave smile, had entered her life like a whirlwind. She had believed in him completely. She had trusted him with every part of herself. And Catherine, her best friend, had been there every step of the way, offering support and advice, reassuring her that everything was as it seemed, but all that was gone now. The life she had worked so hard to build had crumbled, and she was left, standing amidst the wreckage, picking up the pieces of her broken heart. The wedding invitation, still seared into her mind, was a reminder of how thoroughly she had been betrayed. James, the man who had promised her forever, had found a new, forever in Catherine. And just like that, Lily found herself in the middle of an emotional storm, one that had been brewing for years and had finally come to a head. She hadn't been able to sit still, to process the overwhelming emotions that had bombarded her after reading the invitation. The weight of the lies, the promises that had been shattered, it was too much to bear. And so she had done what any person in her position would have done. She ran. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally. She ran from the life she had known, from the people who had hurt her, from the expectations that had been placed on her. She needed space. She needed time. And most of all, she needed to escape. Las Vegas had been an impulse, a spontaneous decision made in the heat of the moment. She had never been to the city before, but she had heard stories of reinvention, of fresh starts, of leaving behind the past and embracing a new identity. It felt like the perfect place for her to disappear for a while, to shed the skin of the woman who had been deceived and betrayed, and to step into something new, something undefined. The taxi jolted to a stop in front of a hotel on the Las Vegas Strip, its neon lights flashing in every direction. It was as if the city itself was alive, pulsing with energy, promising adventure, excitement, and the thrill of the unknown. For a moment, Lily just sat there, her fingers gripping the seat, her heart pounding in her chest. Was this the right choice? Could a single impulsive decision really help her heal from the devastation she had just experienced? She stepped out of the cab and walked into the lobby, the cool air-conditioned air hitting her face as she crossed the threshold. The lobby was exactly what she expected. Glitzy, glamorous, and overflowing with wealth and decadence. But it didn't faze her. It didn't matter what was around her. Nothing in this world could be worse than the hurt she had left behind in New York. She checked in at the counter, taking the keycard and making her way to the elevator, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease with every step she took away from the life she had known. She had no plan. There was no grand vision for what she would do while she was here. All she knew was that she needed time to think, to clear her head, to figure out what came next. She had arrived in a city known for quick decisions and even quicker reinventions, but deep down she knew that no amount of neon lights or fast-paced action could fix the emptiness that lingered in her heart. She would have to do that herself. The suite she had booked was exactly what she needed. Quiet, simple, and beautiful. A room high above the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the sprawling desert beyond. It was the perfect place to reflect, to gather her thoughts. She dropped her suitcase onto the bed and walked to the windows, staring out at the glittering lights below. The city was full of people living their own lives, chasing their own dreams, and in a way, it made Lily feel both small and free at the same time. She sank into the plush armchair by the window, her mind still, racing, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the questions that now loomed large in her life. How could she have been so blind? How had she not seen what was happening right in front of her? The late nights, the whispers behind her back. Everything had been a lie, and the hardest part was that she hadn't seen it coming. She had trusted Catherine. She had trusted James. And now she was left alone, in a city far from home, trying to figure out what to do next. The pain was raw, the kind of deep, aching hurt that only betrayal could cause. It was as though a part of her had died, leaving a hollow shell of who she once was. But in that hollow, there was something else, something flickering deep inside her. Hope. The small, fragile ember of hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something new. Maybe Las Vegas, with all its bright lights and promises of reinvention, could give her the space she needed to heal, to rebuild, to rediscover who she was without the baggage of the past. Lily leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her racing thoughts. But even in the quiet of the hotel suite, she could feel the weight of her decision hanging over her. She had left New York, but she couldn't leave behind the ghosts that haunted her. No matter how far she ran, the memories of James and Catherine would always follow her. The pain would always follow her. The sound of her phone buzzing interrupted her thoughts. She reached for it, her fingers trembling as she saw the name on the screen. James. He was trying to reach her. She should have expected it. He'd probably heard about her sudden departure, and now he was probably trying to fix things, to explain himself. But there was no explanation that could undo the damage. There was no apology that could make things right. Lily pressed the ignore button and set the phone down on the table. She didn't need to hear his voice right now. She didn't need to hear his excuses, his fabricated reasons for why he had betrayed her. She had heard it all before. What she needed now was silence. She needed peace. And in that moment, she made a vow to herself. She would never let anyone control her happiness again. She would never let anyone make her feel less than she was worth. Las Vegas, with its neon lights and promises of reinvention, might not have the answers, but it was a place where she could find her own. And maybe, just maybe, this was where she would find the strength to let go of everything that had held her back. As the hours passed, Lily sat in the quiet of her suite, reflecting on the path that had led her here. She had been a fool to believe in James, to believe in the perfect love story they had shared. But now, as she sat in this strange city, surrounded by nothing but her own thoughts, she realized that she had the power to rewrite her story. She didn't need James or Catherine or anyone else to define her worth. She was Lily Betts Davies, and she was strong enough to rebuild her life from the ashes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and perhaps even more heartbreak. But for now, in this moment, she was free. Free from the lies, free from the hurt, free from everything that had tried to define her. Las Vegas had given her something more than a temporary escape. It had given her a chance to breathe, to reset, and to rediscover who she was at her core. And maybe that was all she really needed. Tomorrow she would take the next step in her journey. But for tonight she allowed herself the luxury of just being. Being alone. Being strong. Being free. Lily's first morning in Las Vegas arrived with the desert sun casting its golden glow over the city, transforming the harsh concrete into a canvas of warmth and light. The noise and buzz of the strip could be heard in the distance, but here in a high-rise hotel room, There was only quiet. It was a surreal moment. The luxury of her suite, the soft sheets that still felt foreign to her skin, the city's pulse. Far below, everything felt strangely detached from the turmoil she had left behind. It was as though she had stepped into another world, one of freedom, of possibility, where nothing could touch her. She had been here for less than 24 hours, but already she could feel the pull of this new world. The city promised a fresh start, but Lily knew that true change would not come from the neon lights and the endless stream of tourists. It would come from within, from taking the first steps toward redefining her life, her identity, and her future. With a deep breath, she made her way to the bathroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red, her face drawn, and her heart still heavy with the weight of the betrayal she had suffered. But beneath all that, there was a flicker, a spark. It was a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was faint, almost fragile, but it was there. Maybe it was the city. Maybe it was just the sheer act of running away. Or maybe it was something deeper, something she had buried within her for too long. She had spent so much of her life caring for others. First, her parents, then James and Catherine. She had spent so much of her time trying to make everything work, trying to fit herself into a mold that wasn't hers. It was exhausting. And now, for the first time, she had the freedom to just be herself, to explore who she was without these constraints of expectations, without the weight of betrayal pressing her down. The faint hum of the city below reminded her that the world didn't stop just because her heart had shattered. Life moved on, whether she was ready or not, and she had to catch up. With one last glance at her reflection, she left the bathroom and pulled on a simple dress, a stark contrast to the fancy gowns she was used to wearing. This was a new beginning, and she didn't need a designer dress to start over. Lily stepped out into the heart of Las Vegas, walking along the bustling streets. The sun was starting to set, casting a soft pink glow over everything, and for a moment she could almost forget everything that had happened. The city, with its flashes of brilliance and moments of escape, held a magnetic energy. People moved past her, their lives unfolding in real time, but Lily remained distant, a silent observer, trying to find the rhythm of this strange, new life she had just begun. Her feet led her to a cafe on the corner, one that promised a quiet atmosphere, an escape from the frenetic energy of the Strip. The cozy interior was warmly lit, with plush velvet chairs and soft jazz playing in the background. She ordered a coffee and sat by the window, looking out at the world beyond, not really seeing it, but feeling it. She was alone in the crowd, but for the first time in what felt like years, she wasn't afraid to be. Lily's phone buzzed in her purse, and her fingers hesitated before pulling it out. Another message from James. Another attempt at explaining, at justifying his actions. But she didn't open it. Instead, she stared at the phone for a long moment before tossing it back into her bag. She had made her decision, and she wasn't going to allow him to continue pulling her strings. Not anymore. She had been a fool, believing in the version of him that he had painted for her. Now the reality was clear, and it was too painful to face. The world outside the cafe continued on, indifferent to the pain she carried. It wasn't the kind of pain that was obvious at first glance. It was hidden deep beneath layers of unresolved emotions, shattered trust, and unanswered questions. But as she sipped her coffee and looked out at the endless horizon, she realized something important. She had made the choice to leave. She had made the choice to walk away, and that was the first step toward healing. She didn't know what came next, but she knew that the past would no longer control her. There was something liberating in that realization. The air in Las Vegas was thick with possibility, and Lily was ready to embrace it. She was ready to find herself again, to rebuild from the ashes of everything that had once seemed certain. Later that evening, Lily found herself wandering through a quieter part of the city. She had no destination in mind, just a desire to keep moving, to explore. As the lights of the Strip faded into the background, she came upon a small park, its peaceful atmosphere a stark contrast to the chaos of the nearby casinos. She sat on a bench, looking up at the stars, letting the cool night air settle around her. This was her space. This was her moment. She wasn't thinking about James or Catherine. She wasn't thinking about the betrayal that had nearly broken her. She was just breathing, and in that moment, she felt more at peace than she had in a long time. But peace is fragile. And as if the universe had decided it was time to shake things up again, she felt a presence beside her. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a commanding aura that she couldn't ignore. His dark hair seemed to absorb the light, and his eyes, when they locked onto hers, were intense, magnetic. For a moment, the world around her disappeared. All she could see was him. "Is this seat taken?" His voice was deep, with a hint of something foreign, something untamed. He didn't ask, he just sat down beside her, and she didn't stop him. Something about the way he carried himself made her feel like she didn't have a choice. "No," she replied, her voice a little too quiet, unsure of what to make of this sudden encounter. He leaned back, glancing up at the stars. For a moment they sat in silence, two strangers in the middle of a city that never slept. It was a comfortable silence, one that didn't need words, but the tension between them, the magnetism, was undeniable. "I'm Lennox," he said after a while, turning his gaze toward her. "Lily," she replied, her voice soft. She wasn't sure why, but there was something about this man that made her feel safer, more present. "Not from around here, are you?" he asked, studying her closely. "No," she said with a small smile. "I'm just passing through." "Passing. Through, huh?" he mused. "The way I see it, sometimes we don't come to places. We're called to them." Lily felt a spark of recognition, as if his words resonated with something deep inside her. "You could be right," she said quietly. For a while they talked about nothing and everything. It wasn't forced. There was no pressure. Lennox didn't ask her about her past, about why she was in Las Vegas, or about the tears she still fought to hold back. Instead, he spoke of the city, its contrast, its beauty, its complexity. There was something captivating about the way he spoke. He wasn't just another man in a suit trying to impress her. He was real in a way she hadn't encountered in a long time. And then, almost unexpectedly, he asked, "Why are you really here, Lily?" She hesitated. She didn't want to share the full weight of her story, not with this stranger who had somehow managed to break through the walls she had built around herself. But his gaze, steady and unflinching, made her feel like maybe it was okay to be vulnerable. "I needed to get away," she said finally. "Needed a change. I guess I'm trying to find myself again." Lennox nodded slowly, as if he understood more than she had intended to say. He didn't press further, though. He simply gave her space to breathe. "You'll find it," he said, his voice steady and confident. "Sometimes we have to lose everything to realize what really matters." Lily felt the weight of his words settle deep within her. She wasn't sure where this conversation would lead, or where she was heading in her life. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Maybe this encounter wasn't an accident. Maybe it was the universe's way of showing her that she wasn't as lost as she thought. As the night wore on, Lily found herself laughing, genuinely, for the first time in what felt like ages. Lennox was different. There was no agenda, no pressure. Just two people finding comfort in each other's presence. She wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. But as she left the park that night, heading back to her hotel, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. In the space of a few hours, Las Vegas had already begun to change her. And maybe, just maybe, Lennox Orion, with his quiet confidence and enigmatic presence, would be a part of that change. As Lily walked into her hotel room, she sat by the window once more, looking out at the city that had already started to feel like home. The future was uncertain, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of it. Tomorrow was a new day, and whatever it brought, she was ready to face it. Lily's first few days in Las Vegas were spent in a daze, a blur of motion that carried her further away from everything that had defined her life until that point. The city, with its dazzling lights and overwhelming energy, felt like a cocoon of luxury and excitement. But beneath the surface, there was something more. A restless feeling that gnawed at her, reminding her that she was running from the hurt, the betrayal, the crushing weight of everything that had gone wrong. She had been avoiding it, trying to escape it all. But deep down, she knew that no amount of distance or glitzy distractions could erase the pain. The betrayal by James and Catherine was not just the destruction of a relationship, but a fundamental fracture in the trust she had placed in the people closest to her. She had trusted them, believed in them, and they had betrayed her in the most heart-wrenching way imaginable. But here, in the midst of the sprawling cityscape, it wasn't the betrayal that haunted her most. It was the silence that came when she was alone, when her thoughts drifted to her life back in New York. Her once promising future had unraveled so quickly, like a house of cards that collapsed with one single crushing blow. The wedding she had been planning, the dreams she had shared with James, the art she had hoped to showcase with him by her side, they were all shattered. Despite the noise and chaos of the city, the deep, empty ache remained. It wasn't long before she found herself questioning her decision to come here. What was she really trying to escape? Was it the city of New York with its towering buildings and relentless pace? Or was it the people, their judgments, their expectations, and most of all their betrayals that she had sought to run from? The answer was unclear, but she knew that in the act of fleeing, something had shifted within her. For the first time, she wasn't defined by the people around her. For the first time, Lily was allowed to simply be. It was the very idea of being alone that had terrified her for so long. But now being alone felt like freedom. In the face of all the uncertainty and heartache, she began to realize that she was stronger than she had ever given herself credit for. It was the start of something new, a beginning, however painful, that would eventually lead her to a place of self-discovery. The days passed in a strange mixture of peace and restlessness. Lily wandered the city, taking in its sights and sounds, learning to move through the crowds with a new sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, she could breathe. It wasn't just the new environment or the lack of people she knew. It was the absence of judgment, the freedom to exist without anyone else's expectations or perceptions weighing on her. This was her life now, and she was determined to make it hers. But amidst the chaos, there was still one thing she couldn't escape: him, Lennox Orion. Lennox had been a stranger when they first met, his presence enigmatic and magnetic. He had appeared like a phantom at the bar, his eyes locked onto hers in a way that made her heart race. He had approached her with the kind of confidence that was impossible to ignore, his words smooth, his voice a low hum that seemed to reverberate through her chest. He had been the kind of man who didn't need to try. His very presence commanded attention, and for some inexplicable reason she had found herself captivated by him. Their conversation had flowed effortlessly, a meeting of two souls that were far from their true selves, seeking something different, something more. But that had been it, a chance meeting, a fleeting moment of connection. And yet there was something about Lennox that lingered in the back of her mind long after they had parted ways. Lily didn't know why she had allowed herself to open up to him. It was a weakness she couldn't afford, not after everything that had happened. But something about him had been real. Unlike the polished facades of the people she had known in New York, he had been authentic. It was a quality she hadn't realized she was missing until she had encountered it again. The next morning, when she woke in her luxurious hotel room, she found herself unable to shake the thoughts of Lennox. He had been on her mind since that first encounter, and no matter how much she tried to push him out, his presence lingered. His confidence, his quiet strength, and the depth in his eyes that seemed to understand more than he let on, she hadn't been able to ignore it. So when her phone buzzed late in the afternoon, it wasn't a surprise to see his name flash on the screen. Lennox had asked her to meet him, to grab a drink at a nearby lounge. A part of her wanted to say no. She didn't need any more distractions, especially not ones that could lead her further down a dangerous path. But another part, the part that had felt a spark of something real for the first time in weeks, urged her to go. She stood before the mirror again, this time with a fresh perspective. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't dressing to please anyone else. She wasn't dressing for James or for the judgment of others. She dressed for herself, choosing a simple black dress, one that felt like an extension of her own identity. It wasn't flashy, but it was elegant. It was the new version of herself. It was Lily unapologetically embracing her own power. The lounge was exactly what she had expected. A quiet upscale space with low lighting and an air of exclusivity. The bar was lined with polished wood, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air. When her eyes scanned the room, she spotted him almost immediately. He was sitting at the far end of the bar, a glass of scotch in hand, his posture relaxed but alert. As soon as their eyes met, a silent understanding passed between them. No words were needed. She walked over to him, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. "You came," he said, his voice steady, but there was a glimmer of something in his eyes, something deeper. "I did," Lily replied, sitting down next to him. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew that tonight she wasn't the same person she had been when they first met. This time she wasn't running. She was present. They talked again about nothing in particular, just letting the conversation flow as it had before. But there was a quiet intensity to it now, a tension that hummed beneath the surface. As the evening wore on, she found herself drawn to him more than she had expected. There was something compelling about him, something that made her feel like he wasn't just a man in a suit, he was someone who could see her, the real her. Lily felt herself begin to let down her guard. She was no longer just the girl who had been betrayed. She was someone new, someone who could embrace change, who could embrace possibility. And Lennox seemed to be the embodiment of that. "Why are you really here, Lily?" Lennox asked, breaking through her thoughts. His question was direct and his gaze unwavering. The question caught her off guard, but it also felt like a challenge to look deeper within herself. She took a slow breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "I'm here because I needed to be. I needed to escape, to find myself again." Lennox's eyes softened. He didn't press further. He simply nodded, as if he understood. "I think you'll find it," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's only when we lose everything that we realize what truly matters." Lily didn't know what to say to that, but she knew that in that moment, something had shifted. She wasn't just running away anymore. She was running toward something, toward herself, toward a future she had yet to define. And as the night stretched on, Lily began to understand that sometimes the most unexpected encounters were the ones that had the power to change everything. She had come to Las Vegas to escape, to forget, but maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to finally face the future. Lily stared at the city skyline outside her penthouse window, the lights of Las Vegas glittering like a millions, tiny stars scattered across the desert. The vibrant colors of the city seemed to pulse with life, a stark contrast to the emotions that swirled within her. After everything, James's betrayal, Catherine's deceit, her whirlwind escape, she found herself here, alone in a new city, yet not alone at all. Lennox had been there, standing beside her, silently supporting her when she needed it the most. But tonight things were different. It wasn't just another evening in Las Vegas. Tonight the world was about to change for Lily again. It wasn't something she had asked for, but it was coming. And it would make all the difference. The past few weeks had been a mix of emotions. She had arrived in Las Vegas wanting to escape, wanting to lose herself in the noise and chaos of the city. But she hadn't expected to find something else entirely, something she wasn't ready for but couldn't walk away from. Lennox Orion had become a constant in her life, a presence that both comforted and confused her. He was a man of power, of wealth, of undeniable strength, but it was the depth behind his eyes that had drawn her in. It wasn't just the physical attraction or his intimidating presence that kept her coming back to him. It was the way he saw her, really saw her. In the days that followed their first meeting, they had spent more time together, talking, getting to know each other. She had learned more about him, his family, the legacy that came with being an Orion. Lennox wasn't just another wealthy businessman. He was a product of generations of power, someone who had been shaped by a life most people couldn't fathom. Yet there was a side of him that no one outside his inner circle had seen. That side, the one he showed only to her, was raw and unfiltered. It was a side of him that made her trust him despite everything that had happened in her life. And yet, despite everything he had given her, his time, his support, his company, Lily still felt the weight of the past dragging at her, reminding her of the betrayal she had suffered. She couldn't forget what James had done, what Catherine had stolen from her. They had been her family, her best friends, and yet they had destroyed everything she had worked so hard for. But as the days passed, something inside Lily began to shift. She no longer saw herself as the victim of their betrayal. She didn't need their validation, their approval. She was stronger than that. For the first time in a long while, she felt empowered, in control of her own life, and it was something she hadn't felt in years. Lennox had given her the space to breathe, to rediscover who she was. But now he was asking her to make a decision, to stay in the world of luxury and power, to be a part of his life, to become part of the Orion legacy. But with that decision came the weight of expectations, the pressure of a life she wasn't sure she was ready for. "Lily, you don't have to decide now," Lennox had told her several times, his voice always calm, steady. "Take your time. This is your choice." But she knew deep down that time was running out. She could feel it, the pull of her old life, the desire to return to New York, to be among people who knew her, to be back where everything had made sense. But she also knew that her past could never define her. It had already tried, and it had failed. She had to make a choice, whether to walk away from everything she knew or embrace a future that was uncertain, thrilling, and terrifying. The idea of stepping into Lennox's world was daunting. The wealth, the power, the endless expectations, it was all so much. But the idea of walking away from him felt even harder. There was a connection between them, something undeniable. They had been brought together by fate, by chance, but now it felt like something more, something real. Lily had always been the kind of person who followed the rules, who played by the book, and who tried to fit into the mold of what was expected of her. But in the wake of her heartbreak, she had begun to question everything. Who was she really? What did she want out of life? And most importantly, what did she deserve? Her mind kept coming back to Lennox. He had shown her a side of herself that she had forgotten existed. He had seen her, not just as an artist or a woman wronged by love, but as someone who could stand on her own, someone who had the strength to rise above the pain. She thought about their conversations, the way he had opened up to her about his own struggles. Lennox wasn't just a man of privilege. He was someone who had faced his own battles, someone who understood what it was like to be trapped by the expectations of others. He had broken free of them just as she had to, and as she sat in the quiet of her penthouse, the city outside still humming with life, Lily made her decision. She was ready. The decision wasn't about money or status. It wasn't about the glamorous world that Lennox offered her. It was about something deeper, something more personal. It was about love, about trust, and about choosing to move forward, no matter how uncertain the future seemed. With a new sense of clarity, Lily stood up, her hand resting on the smooth surface of the glass table in front of her. The weight of the moment settled over her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt sure. She wasn't the same woman she had been when she first arrived in Las Vegas. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the life that was waiting for her. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt. But she also knew that with Lennox by her side, she could face anything. She picked up her phone and dialed Lennox's number, her fingers trembling slightly. When he answered, his voice was steady, as always. "Lily," he said, his tone warm but serious. "Are you okay?" She took a deep breath, her heart racing. "I'm more than okay, Lennox. I'm ready. I'm ready to be with you, to step into your world. I'm ready for what's next." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and then he spoke, his voice low with emotion. "You don't know how much that means to me. I've never wanted anything more than to be with you, Lily. We'll figure everything else out together." And in that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. The past, the betrayal, the pain, it all faded into the background. What mattered now was the future, and Lily was ready to embrace it. As she hung up the phone and stood by the window, looking out at the bright lights of the city, she knew that her life was about to change forever. She had taken a chance on love, on herself, and on the man who had shown her what it meant to be truly seen. The journey ahead would be uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Lily wasn't afraid. She was ready to live, ready to love, ready to build a future, one step at a time. The soft glow of morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Manhattan penthouse, casting a golden hue over the vast, elegantly designed room. Lily stood motionless on the terrace, her eyes scanning the cityscape as though searching for answers in the skyline. Her hands instinctively cupped her belly, still flat to the eye, but now a secret vessel to the life forming within her. The doctor's words from just yesterday echoed endlessly in her mind. "You're pregnant, Miss Carter, congratulations." Pregnant. The word had both soothed and shaken her. In a twist of fate that not even the wildest of her paintings could have predicted, her escape from betrayal and heartbreak had led her to this moment, carrying the child of a man she'd only known for a blink in the grand timeline of her life, yet who had become her anchor in every storm. Lennox had taken the news with a mix of awe and reverence. There had been no panic, no hesitation, only the raw emotion of a man realizing his world was about to change. When she had shown him the test result, barely whispering the words, he had dropped to his knees. Not in shock, but as though the weight of his gratitude had brought him there. He had wrapped his arms around her waist, whispered "thank you" against her skin, and promised again and again that she wouldn't face any of it alone. But today the gravity of that promise pressed more heavily on Lily than ever before. She had spent the morning lost in thought, silently wandering from room to room. She watched the staff prepare the nursery that Lennox had instructed to be converted from the art gallery room down the hall. She heard the low voices of assistants, making calls, arrangements, ensuring that nothing would disrupt her rest or her security. She was surrounded by luxury, blanketed by protection, but her soul felt raw and exposed. Pregnancy had unearthed every vulnerability she thought she'd buried. Memories of a childhood marked by instability. The absence of a father figure, her mother's constant emotional withdrawal. She didn't just want to give her child a good life. She wanted to give them everything she had never received. Security, truth, unconditional love. When Lennox found her on the terrace, she didn't turn to face him. She didn't need to. He came to her in quiet steps, wrapped his arms around her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. "You've been quiet all day," he said, his voice soft as the breeze drifting across the city skyline. "Tell me what's going through that mind of yours." She took a breath but said nothing. He waited. Finally, she spoke. "What if I mess this up?" Lennox tightened his embrace, his lips brushing the top of her shoulder. "Then we'll fix it together. But you won't, because you're already more of a mother than you know. You care enough to worry, Lily. That's where it starts." Tears brimmed in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I've never had a real family, Lennox. Not one that stayed. Not one that chose me. I don't know how to be what this baby needs." Lennox turned her gently to face him. "And I've had too much of a family, the kind that suffocates with expectations and drowns you in legacy. I never wanted to pass that on. Until you." She looked up into his eyes, searching, still aching for reassurance. "Why me?" "Because when I met you, I saw the truth. You were bleeding, Lily, not on the outside, but from wounds you kept hidden so well. And still you stood up and dared to love again. You dared to trust. That's the kind of courage I want our child to inherit, not a name, not wealth. That." She broke then, just a little. Not with sobs, but with the silent tears that trailed down her cheeks as she let her head rest against his chest. He held her as though he could carry the weight of every fear. The next few days were filled with moments that teetered between wonder and overwhelm. Victoria, Lennox's poised and polished mother, had arrived from Paris the morning after they shared the news with close family. Dressed in pristine Chanel and a smile that could freeze time, she swept into the penthouse as if it were a royal court and announced that the Orion heir or heiress would have nothing but the finest. Despite her intimidating elegance, Victoria had shown Lily unexpected warmth. Over lunch, she gently placed a hand on Lily's and said, "You're carrying the future of this family. But more importantly, you are now the heart of it." Lily wasn't used to being the center of anything. She had lived a life in the margins. Drawing, painting, building a name, yes, but never belonging. And now she was being embraced, revered even, by people she once would have feared to approach. It was dizzying. By the end of the week, Lennox had taken her to their private estate just outside the city. The sprawling home, nestled in a valley of old oaks and wild gardens, was unlike anything she had ever seen. "It's where I came when I needed quiet," he told her as they stood at the back veranda, the hills stretching endlessly ahead. Lily spent hours walking the gardens, finding peace among the ivy-covered arches and secret corners blooming with lavender and roses. And every evening, Lennox read to her. Sometimes poetry, sometimes journals from his ancestors, sometimes silly articles from fashion magazines just to make her laugh. It was the quiet kind of intimacy, not born from passion but from presence, that made her fall deeper in love with him. But love, she knew, was only one part of this story. There were still shadows trailing behind her, questions from her past and decisions yet to be made. One evening, as they shared tea beneath the stars, Lily asked the question that had haunted her for days. "Do you think they'll ever forgive? Me, James and Catherine?" Lennox set his cup down slowly. "Does it matter?" "Yes," she admitted. "Because even though they hurt me, there was once love there. And I don't want this child to grow up in a world where bitterness still lingers." He nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe you should forgive them. Not for them, but for you. And for our child." It was the answer she hadn't expected, but the one she needed most. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't weakness. It was strength. And it wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing what you wanted to carry with you into the future. And Lily? She no longer wanted to carry the pain. That night, she wrote 2 letters. One to James, one to Catherine. She didn't send them, at least not yet. But she wrote every word her heart needed to say. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. It was the beginning of something new. Not just a chapter, but an entirely different book. Lily Carter, the woman who had once stood broken in a cold Manhattan apartment, was now writing her story. Not in tears, but in hope. And with every kick she began to feel inside her belly, every flutter of life growing stronger. She knew. The most important masterpiece she would ever create was no longer on canvas. It was in the beating heart she carried, and the man who had chosen to love her, even when she had nothing left to give. The sun was setting over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the towering skyline. It was the kind of evening that felt like it belonged in a movie. The golden light filtering through the apartment windows, dancing across the marble floors, and illuminating the family that Lily had never expected to call her own. Yet here she was, standing in the penthouse she had once only dreamed of, watching her husband, Lennox Orion, hold their son in his arms. It felt as though everything in her life had been leading to this moment. The past few months had been a blur of new beginnings, revelations, and transformations. She had gone from being a betrayed woman, left to pick up the broken pieces of her heart, to finding a love she never thought she would experience, a love that didn't ask her to be anyone but herself. Lennox had shown her what real love was, not the kind that was built on expectations or promises that could be shattered in an instant, but the kind that grew quietly, steadily, without fanfare, through trust, patience, and understanding. She had never believed in fate before. But when she thought of the night she had met Lennox in a moment of reckless escape, her beliefs were slowly shifting. She had gone to Las Vegas to run away from the pain, to hide from the people who had torn her apart. Instead, she had met a man who, despite his own reservations and complicated life, had chosen her. In those brief hours in a dimly lit bar, their destinies had been written. She had left everything behind. Her old life, the pain, the deception, and found herself, and in the process had unknowingly found the future she had been desperately searching for. Now, she stood at the precipice of a new life, the kind that didn't just promise happiness, but a deep, meaningful kind of peace that had eluded her for so long. She had found herself, yes, but she had also found someone who saw her, truly saw her, in a way she had never been seen before. It was a love story far removed from the conventional fairy tales she had grown up imagining. She had expected her life to follow the usual path, meet someone, fall in love, get married, build a life together. But the life she had built with Lennox was one of unexpected twists, of finding comfort in chaos, of learning to trust when her heart had been shattered. Before, it had not been easy, and there were moments when she had questioned herself, her worth, her choices, and the consequences of them. But in Lennox's arms, she realized that she had made the right choice. They both had. The morning she had discovered she was pregnant had been a turning point. She had spent years building a career, a life in the art world, but now she found herself facing a new kind of responsibility, a new kind of love. A love that wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the little life growing inside her, a life that would belong to them both. Lennox had been by her side every step of the way, from the moment the test results had come in, to the first ultrasound, to the quiet nights when she couldn't sleep, her mind racing with the uncertainty of motherhood. He had been her rock, her constant. Where she had once feared the unknown, Lennox had taught her to embrace it with open arms. Her love for him grew every day, not just for the man he was, but for the way he made her feel. Valued, cherished, understood. When he held her in his arms, she knew she was safe, not just physically, but emotionally. He had shown her what it meant to love with a depth that wasn't rooted in need or dependency, but in respect, trust, and a shared vision for the future. But there were still shadows lurking in the corners of her past. James, Catherine, the betrayal. It was hard to escape those memories, no matter how many new beautiful ones she made with Lennox. There were moments when the weight of her past would press on her chest, making it hard to breathe, and she would question whether the scars would ever fade. But Lennox had always been there to remind her that she was not defined by those people or those moments. She was defined by the choices she made now, the life she had now. And that life was filled with love, security, and the promise of something even more beautiful. Today they were preparing for the next chapter of their journey. The gallery opening, her first as both a wife and an artist, was just days away. It was a milestone, one that would celebrate not just her work but everything she had overcome. Her paintings had always been her form of expression, the way she could speak without saying a word. But this exhibition, this opening, was different. It was not just a display of her art, it was a declaration of her new life. A life she had created for herself and for the child she carried. It was a life she had fought for, against all odds, as she moved through their Manhattan apartment preparing for the evening ahead. She thought about how far she had come. She had been a young woman once, looking for validation in the eyes of others. She had sought love, approval, acceptance. But now she knew better. Now she sought truth. She sought peace, and she had found it in Lennox, in the family they were building, and in the art that was her soul's language. She had made mistakes, yes. She had trusted the wrong people. She had been broken. But from that brokenness, something new had emerged. She had learned that sometimes it's not the perfect moments that define us, but the imperfect ones. The ones where we stumble, fall, and rise again, stronger than before. Her past, with all its pain and heartbreak, had led her here, to this moment of clarity, to this moment of love. As the evening drew closer, Lily found herself in front of the full-length mirror in their bedroom, adjusting the hem of her dress. She looked at herself with new eyes, eyes that no longer saw just the woman who had been hurt, but the woman who had healed, the woman who had found her way back to herself, the woman who was about to step into the world with Lennox by her side, her family growing within her, and her heart full of a love that was as deep and enduring as the city that sprawled before her. She took a deep breath and smiled. There was no turning back now. The life she had once dreamed of was unfolding before her, one step at a time. And no matter what came next, she knew she was ready. For the first time in her life, she felt truly at peace, and it was only just the beginning. Lilibet Davies' journey is a tale of heartbreak, self-discovery, and ultimate transformation. From the shocking betrayal of her fiancé James and her best friend Catherine, to the impulsive marriage in Las Vegas to a man she barely knew, Lily's life took a series of unexpected turns. What began as an escape from the lies that had once defined her soon became the beginning of a new life filled with love, security, and possibilities. After the betrayal, Lily could have chosen to retreat into bitterness, hiding from the world that had caused her so much pain. But instead, she made a bold decision. She took a leap of faith, running to Las Vegas where she met Lennox Orion, a man whose power, wealth, and presence were unmatched. But what truly drew her to him wasn't his money or status. It was the way he made her feel seen. For the first time, Lily realized that love didn't need to be built on perfection or promises. It needed to be built on honesty, understanding, and the freedom to be who you truly were, without fear of judgment. As the story unfolded, Lily's art became a metaphor for her own personal transformation. Her canvases, once filled with the weight of disappointment, soon began to reflect a newfound hope. Lennox stood by her through every step, proving that love could be unconditional and unwavering. The life they built together wasn't perfect. It was real. And it was more than enough. When Lily found out she was pregnant with triplets, the excitement was palpable. She had faced so many obstacles in her life, but this felt like the ultimate reward. It was a new beginning, not just for her and Lennox, but for the family they were creating together. Through each challenge, Lennox's devotion remained unwavering, and Lily found herself embracing motherhood with strength and confidence. The ultimate lesson from Lily's story is about the power of second chances both in love and in life. Sometimes our most difficult experiences lead us to exactly where we are meant to be. Lily's painful journey of betrayal wasn't the end of her story. It was the catalyst for a beautiful new beginning. She learned that she didn't need to live for others' expectations, and that her worth didn't lie in her past mistakes or what people thought of her. True happiness comes when we allow ourselves the freedom to break free from the chains of our past and trust the unknown. Lily's life is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of loving yourself first. In today's world, it's easy to get caught up in what society expects from us, but Lily's story teaches us that the most important thing we can do is follow our hearts and trust that the right path will reveal itself, even when we don't have all the answers. Life lesson. The greatest happiness comes not from perfection or external validation, but from finding peace within yourself. We must give ourselves the space to heal, to make bold decisions, and to embrace the unexpected. Our past does not define us. It's the choices we make moving forward that shape our future. How to apply this lesson in your life. Take the time to reflect on your past mistakes, but don't let them hold you back. Allow yourself to heal and to dream bigger than you ever thought possible. Don't be afraid of change. It might just be the catalyst you need to discover who you're truly meant to be. Trust yourself and the journey, even when the path is unclear. The best stories often begin with the most unexpected chapters. Quiz. What is the main lesson Lily learns in her journey? A. The best way to heal is to forget the past. B. True happiness comes from accepting yourself and trusting the journey. Please comment your answer as A or B below.